Welcome to Women of Courage, Season 2. I'm Allison Henkell, sitting in for your host, Ann Miner. You may recognize me from a previous episode. Yes, I am proud to be a woman of courage. Guests on Women of Courage are women from all walks of life who have faced significant life challenges with their health, family, career, or business. In fact, every aspect of their lives. Our Women of Courage have found the strength and the courage to confront, to overcome, and to succeed in spite of everything. We share Anne's hope that our stories will encourage and inspire you as you face your own challenges, that you will take action to courageously pursue your own dreams and passions, no matter what obstacles are presented along the way. Stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment with today's Woman of Courage.
If I were brave.
An important reminder from Rogers. For cable customers whose TV is connected directly to their analog cable outlet, analog versions of select channels will continue to be phased out. Simply order a free digital adapter to continue to receive all of the TV channels you currently enjoy with improved digital sound and picture quality. Just connect the adapter to your cable outlet and TV. To order your free rental adapter, please call us today or visit rogers.com/digital adapter.
Woodstock Council discusses hot topics that can affect your future. Hear what Woodstock politicians are saying every Thursday at 7, only on Rogers TV.
OMAC London Knights Hockey, only on Rogers.
Welcome back to Women of Courage. With us today is our guest, Brenda Tait. Hi, Brenda, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, I know you have an exciting story, an interesting story that you want to tell us, so just start wherever you're comfortable.
Probably the best place to start would be when I was a teenager. I came from a family that was very supportive, very good family, very good upbringing, happy childhood. Got into high school, and although I had been good in school, high school was a little bit like a fish out of water for me. I was a little bit chubby, not bad, but a little bit chubby, and was never part of the in crowd. And I watched a lot of my friends kind of go partying, and that really wasn't my thing. But I had very good luck in that I had good friends. I always seemed to be able to choose good friends. But it was still a little bit uncomfortable for me. Didn't date a whole lot. When I got to be in grade 11, I actually started dating someone who wasn't in high school anymore. He was my first beau, as they say. We dated for 2 years, and I graduated high school. We broke up. And I always felt that along the way, I would always like someone and maybe want to date them. And they always liked me, but they never quite liked me that way. So I would get left in the dust and felt kind of bad. So after I got out of high school and went to college, I met someone, and by this time I was about 20 years old. And we started dating, and I don't know whether I possibly thought nothing better was going to come along for me, but I think sometimes as girls tend to do, you think time's passing by. And although I knew there were some things that we didn't really connect with, I kind of thought, well, when you get married, that'll all change, right? That's what young girls think. So we dated for quite a while, and we got married when I was 24. And we were married for 7 years. And along the way, I don't really think that I understood that I was unhappy. We had a good life. We were okay with our money. We were okay. We had a home. Everything was good in our social life. But along the way, I got a very low self-esteem. And it was just through things that had been said. and it was kind of chipping away at me, and it was death by 1,000 cuts, basically. And my mother had been married a couple of times. She was married and got divorced back in the day when you didn't do that. And her husband had been abusive, so she got out of that relationship. And I vowed that I was not going to repeat her mistakes, even though there was nothing she could really do about it. But I didn't want to repeat her mistakes, and there was no physical abuse in my relationship, but there were certainly some emotional abuse, I would say. He was a good person, not that he wasn't, but there was some drinking involved. And I think little by little, I just became lower and lower. And one night, it got so bad actually that one night we went to a dance, and I had got ready. I was standing in front of the mirror, and he came into the room and said, "Well, you're not going to wear that, are you?" And I said, "Yeah, is that not okay?" And, well, whatever. And we got to the dance, and I walked in, and someone said to me, "Boy, you look really nice tonight." And I turned around to see who they were talking to, because I couldn't even imagine it could be me. So I guess I realized at that point that there was something wrong. And then when I was 29, my brother passed away very suddenly, and no warning at all. He had an aneurysm to his heart. And I think that was probably the changing point in my life, where I decided that unconsciously, I think I really took a look at myself and thought, do I really want to live this way for the rest of my life? And I decided no, I didn't want to. But, you always want to try. You always want to give it that little bit extra. So I thought, well, if we buy a bigger house, I think we'll be happier. Even though I knew intellectually that wasn't true. So we bought a bigger house, and of course, no, we weren't happier. And I would wander around the house and think, wow, this is so nice, and I'm so miserable. And finally, it had to come to an end, which it did. The good news is that I got over my brother's death okay, and I did meet the love of my life, which we're still married, and it seems like 2 years ago, and it's been like 15, so that's a good thing. But after I got with my next husband, we went through a period where my mother was very sick, and she had actually been sick my whole life. And I was actually surprised she died when she was 73. She had been sick since she was probably in her 40s. At one point, they thought she had MS. When I was in high school, had a valve replaced to her heart and had open heart surgery way back then. That was rather scary. So every time she would get sick and go in the hospital, you wondered whether she was going to come out. And my father went through a lot of stress with that and really, had a hard time with it. And I think finally, they were lucky enough that they got to go down to Arizona every year and spend time in the good weather for her breathing. And she had a lot of problems. They used to joke with the doctors and say her medical file was so thick that it was a challenge when they went to medical conventions. But because they went down there, she ended up getting what they called valley fever. And it was something that was in the dust in the desert. And she didn't really want to go to the doctor down there because she was afraid. They did have insurance, but she was afraid it would be costly. And they probably would have been able to help her right away, but because she didn't do anything about it and came home, she got this terrible cough and finally started coughing up blood and went to the hospital, and they found a spot on her lung. So then we had to go through the whole rigmarole of them deciding what was wrong with her, which they came to a conclusion fairly quickly. And the medication was extremely expensive. It wasn't covered, so there was a fight there. The doctors had to fight for her there. And they decided that they would put her on this medication, and she was fine with that. And she stayed on that for probably, I think it was about 3 months. And when she went back, the spot hadn't cleared up. So they decided that they would have to operate and take it out. And she had gone on, by the time they actually operated, it had been probably a year. And she was just not herself. She couldn't go outside. If it was humid outside, she couldn't breathe. And when it came to the operation, and my dad didn't really want her to have it. He was afraid that would be the end of her. And she said, no, we have to do this. And as it turned out, when they got in there, they had to take out a third of her lung. So she was, I think, a little bit shocked by that. And she came out and was in intensive care, and then she went down to the step-down unit from there and seemed to be coming along okay. Then she ended up back in ICU again, And we went to visit her, and they were talking about taking her off of, getting her out of there and putting her back in her room. And we got home and got a phone call and said that we better come back down because her heart had stopped for 4 minutes. So we all went back down and we had the discussions with the doctor, and they said they couldn't take her off of life support for a little while. And so we talked about it, and they said, well, we'll give you 3 days. We have to sort of keep her on for 3 days. They called us back in about 24 hours and said, it's not gonna work. So we went through that whole ordeal, and my poor father, that was sort of the first time I'd really seen him break down and have a hard time. And my mother had never really been the same since my brother had passed away. She was a woman who was always in charge of everything, and all of a sudden she wasn't. And I had to step up and be the person in charge. And she really went downhill after that, and I think that's probably why she didn't fight in the end. So we went through that and the funeral of that. And then I became my father's next wife because he only lived around the corner from me, and he needed somebody to bounce ideas off of because Mom had always been there. So for 7 years, there wasn't one moment of one day where he didn't know where I was. So it was almost like being a child again. So that was very difficult because I was also taking care of my family. I had a stepson at the time, and it was rather difficult. So there were definitely some challenges coming up there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we will have Brenda continue with her story.
What would I do today if I were...
Occupying an important position in the history of Woodstock is Bernadette Smith, one of Canada's first women mayors, and the first elected in Woodstock. Breaking barriers of prejudice and setting a precedent for the women who followed her, Bernadette served as an alderman for 12 years and was elected mayor an amazing 6 times. She was known as a colorful woman who had dyed red hair and enjoyed the occasional drink at the pub. As mayor and alderman, Bernadette worked to strengthen local industry, enlarge the general hospital, and revitalize the city's core, among other initiatives. In addition to making history, Bernadette Smith was devoted to preserving it. Serving as curator of the Oxford Museum from 1956 to 1972, she worked tirelessly to ensure the protection of the old town hall building, now known as the Woodstock Museum, which faced demolition in 1965. To find out more, contact the Woodstock Museum and check them out on the web at www.woodstockmuseum.ca.
Bert is my role model. I want to be like Bert.
Not only do I think I help her, but I think she helps me.
Being an amputee is challenging. I deal with obstacles by just knowing that I've got people to be there to support me through it. I've got my friends, I've got my family, I've got the War Amps.
Thanks to the War Amps, she doesn't have to worry about being anything else but herself.
If I were
Welcome back to Women of Courage. We are here with Brenda Tait. And Brenda, you were telling us about all of the trauma that was happening in your life. And what I really want to know is, how are you doing through this? And how are you dealing?
Well, outwardly, I was dealing very well. Everybody thought I had it all together. My family, of course, I didn't get a whole lot of help from because they assumed that I had everything under control. And me being who I was, didn't say I need help. So I would like to phrase this as saying this was my corn crying incident of 2001. What had happened was I was packing my husband's lunch one morning, and a lot had been going on with my dad, and my dad didn't just call me once a day. My dad would call me 3 or 4 times a day and have to talk to me. And then there was my husband and my stepson and taking care of them, and my stepson was a teenager, so of course, he was a good teenager, but still a teenager in the house. And one morning I was packing my husband's lunch, and I opened up the freezer to take a freezer pack out, and it fell on the floor along with a bag of corn. And the bag of corn broke open, and the corn went all over the floor. And I did what any sane woman would do, and I sat down in the middle of the kitchen floor and cried like a baby, because that was just the last straw. So at that point, I think my family understood what was going on. My father had a heart attack right after that, and when we went to the hospital, I sort of unloaded on them and said, here's what's been happening, here's how I felt. And they were very good, very supportive, and helped out and said, you know, we need to help out here, and that was great. So we got over that, and then my dad, he basically lived for 7 years after my mom, and he'd always had bad circulation in his legs. He wasn't a diabetic, but he'd always had bad circulation, and he ended up getting both legs off eventually. And he died in his sleep, which I think was very fitting for a man who'd been through so much stress. But when he was gone, you know, it's funny, I didn't want to hear 5 phone calls a day, but one would sure be nice. Yeah. And at that point, then, I have to admit, if anybody's ever taken care of anybody, an ailing parent, when they are gone, it's almost like a relief, because that responsibility that you've sort of become the parent is gone. So at that point, I was an insurance broker, and I had fallen into that job. Sort of, I didn't know what else to do, and someone had said, hey, why don't you come and be an insurance broker? So it seemed like a great idea, and I was in that job for 18 years, and really didn't like it. I was good at it, but I really didn't like it. And one day I decided I wanted to be out in sales, and I thought, you know, I'm going to stop in and, you know, see some of these places in Woodstock. My boss said, yeah, you go out one day a week and sell. And the first place I went into that was a shop owned by a woman, and she's actually been a guest on the show. She said, oh, you need to join this networking group. So off I went, and I joined this networking group, and I met such a wonderful group of women, Ann Miner being one of them. And they seem to show up at the right time. You know, they say when you're ready, the teacher will come, and that's basically what happened for me. So I had some hard decisions to make. I knew I wasn't happy in my job. But it was a big risk to move, and I went to another woman who I'm partners with now in a business, Wanda. She's also been on the show, and she sort of helped me get rid of my demons and get rid of my baggage, and decide that maybe it was time to take a chance. So I had talked about wanting to do public speaking. I had talked about the fact that I love dealing with people, and in the span of a very short time, I quit my job, which I have to say, although I was happy to go, was very difficult on the day that I was a licensed broker one day and not the next. And that was 18 years of history that was gone. But I haven't regretted it for one moment. And I was able to, we were sitting in a restaurant one day talking about what would happen when I wanted to do public speaking. And Ann said, you should do that in character. And I thought, in character? What are you talking about? And then I got thinking back to a time when my husband and I do a bluegrass circle where we go out camping with a bunch of people who play music. And one place we were at, 4 women, one of the women had a convertible, and we were just being silly. And this other woman and I said, oh, let's sit in the back of the convertible. And we were near Stratford, Ontario. So we thought, well, let's go into Stratford and, you know, let's pretend we're stars, because nobody's going to know the difference, right? It's Stratford. So we put kerchiefs around our heads and sunglasses on, and she was Elizabeth Starr, and this name came, Jezebel Peppa, and I thought, where'd that come from? And we got the car, and we drove around the campground first of all, and everybody was waving at us, and we blew kisses and had a great time. And then we drove into Stratford, and we were waving at everybody on the sidewalk, and it was just silliness, but it was fun. So when Ann talked about doing this in character, I thought, maybe I should resurrect Jezebel. So then she talked about doing the television show, and she said, you know, maybe Jezebel should close out the TV show. And I thought, oh, wow, a regular gig. So as it turned out, I started doing that and love it. And then we started this production company called Smarty Pants. And Ann and Wanda and I are dealing with that, and we had our first Women's Weekend in November, actually, which was amazing. We had a wonderful attendance, and we had a wonderful group of women, and it just fed my soul. I had always wanted to do something with women, and this seems to be a good fit. I never knew how. I never knew when I was going to do it, where I was going to do it, how it would come to be. And I think probably for 2 or 3 years, I felt on the edge of something, that something was about to happen, but just couldn't put my finger on what it was. And then I met these women, and it all just kind of came to be. So that was wonderful. And the rest, they say, is history. But I'm having a good time with it, and I've spoken at a couple of places now, and I'm getting more comfortable with it. But I find my latest thing is that Jezebel isn't really my alter ego. I'm her alter ego. She's really, and I think there's a Jezebel in everybody. Everybody has that little person inside them that wants to scream out and have fun and be crazy. So that's kind of where I am now.
And you're having a good time with Jezebel, and you've dealt with your prior
Yes.
demons, and so it's great to see that you've sort of come full circle and you're back to the person that you were saying in high school. You always knew that that person was there.
Yes.
And now you found her.
Yeah. And I'm just sorry that it took so long. But, you know, I think sometimes you have to go through that journey, and you have to have what you don't want in order to appreciate what you do want and to know what you do have.
Right.
So.
And I think part of the catalyst behind this show is to try and take experiences like yours and mine and the other people who you've mentioned that have been on the show and kind of put it out there for the world so you can see, regardless of where you've come from.
That's right.
You can end up somewhere great.
That's right. And everybody has had, they may not have had anything huge happen in their life or anything extremely traumatic, but even just taking care of a parent when they're sick is a big deal. So it's, you know, it's exhausting. It takes a lot out of you. And I had it easy. He was very self-sufficient up until the end.
Right.
There's some people that look after them for a long, long time. Yeah, so it's hard.
Yeah, it's always great to hear the stories of the other women of courage. And as you said, it doesn't have to have been something traumatic. It's everyone has something that they go through in their life that is the challenge that they're meant to overcome so that they can become who they're supposed to be.
That's right. And if you're unhappy, I know my dad always used to say, you know, there's really no degree of unhappiness. If you're unhappy, you're unhappy. And when it's happening to you, it's a big deal because it's happening to you.
Right.
Yeah.
And now, a few words of wisdom from a wonderful, wacky, one-of-a-kind woman, Jezebel Peppa, a woman of courage in her own right, who will share with us her thoughts on the themes of today's episode.
Hello, darlings. Jezebel Peppa here. Look at me, darlings. I've tried something new. I have a new chapeau, new boa. It's so exciting. I think I might even go and buy another hat. It's so exciting. You may have spent your life doing something that you're bored with and you're scared to make a decision to think outside your box. Don't be afraid to think outside your box. Look at the wonderful things that can happen. You heard Brenda's story, my alter ego. You heard how on a lark she decided to be Jezebel Peppa one day. And now, look at me. I'm Jezebel Peppa. So make sure you take the time, think about what you'd like to do that's exciting. Think outside that box and celebrate the wonderful things that might happen. And always remember to celebrate the Jezebel in you.
I'm Mike Harding, host of Innovation Oxford. One of the ways we remember important historical events. And of course, you've seen the kind of haircut they give here. Watch us on Rogers TV. Innovation is everywhere.
OMAC London Nights Hockey, only on Rogers.
You're still in high school, but it's never too early to start thinking about the rest of your life. Applying to university takes time and effort. By grade 11, you should start evaluating your strengths and weaknesses. Think about what you most enjoy with your eye on choosing a major. Talk to your guidance counselor. Research programs and their prerequisites. Attend universities and campus fairs, and above all, ask a lot of questions. Things happen fast in grade 12. In many cases, you can apply to a program as early as October. Otherwise, use the December break to hit that first big wave of deadlines in January, and don't forget to check out scholarships too. Most schools will let you know if you've been accepted by March or April. Pick the one that's right for you academically and socially. Spending time on this now will pay off with an education that enriches your life.
If I were brave.
Thank you, Jezebel, and thank you, Brenda. I know it took great courage for you to come on this show and tell your story to a television audience. You have certainly inspired us all today, and as our thank you gift, you will receive a copy of Ann Miner's book, Succeeding in Spite of Everything. And you will take home our beautiful centerpiece by Floral Occasions in Ingersoll and a collection of handmade chocolates from our own local chocolatier, Cindy Walker of Chocolate Tea in Ingersoll. Now, we would love to hear from our audience. Last season, many of you wrote to our guests directly to let them know how you had been inspired and encouraged by their stories. We would love to be able to share your comments and feedback on future episodes of Women of Courage. So please contact Anne directly by email at the address on your screen below, ann@annminer.com. And of course, we would love it if you liked our Facebook page, Women of Courage TV. Now remember, in every setback lies opportunity. Opportunity for you to call up all you have learned throughout your own experiences and through other people's stories, and to rely on your core beliefs and values, to rally your strength and your courage, to find your way through and to overcome and succeed in spite of everything.
Today, if I were what would I do today if I were brave? What would I do today if I were brave? What would I do today if I were brave? What would I do today if I were brave? If I refuse to listen to the voice of fear, with a voice of courage whisper in my ear. If I were brave, I'd walk the razor's edge where fools and dreamers dare to tread, and never lose faith, even when losing my way. What step would I take today if I